You see, just as fast as I started falling in love with the game, I quickly began to remember why I have so many problems with these games in the first place. After beating the first boss, I stumbled upon the second zone in the game, the Green Path. It's a zone that lies at the antithesis of the more black and somber notes of the first area, and it's a breath of fresh air. However, that sense of elevation lasted for only a moment, because then I ended up here, looking at my map, wondering where to go. Down one path was a locked door, and up another a ledge I wasn't able to reach. It's the exact type of moment and struggle that Hollow Knight intends for you to have. It's at the core of its game design. And it's this same game design that has led so many others to fall in love with the Metroidvania genre of games in the first place, stumbling upon a new discovery and having no clue how to handle it, only to come back later when you've unlocked the necessary item or upgrade. But you see, that's just the issue. Progression relies on things outside of your control. I can't get up on that ledge, I can't get through that door, and some areas are completely blocked off. That is, until I unlock that special something that gets me in. So you open your map and look around, for the spots you missed that are still unexplored, and for those little nooks and crannies full of secrets you might be able to solve now that unlock new abilities and help you progress. It's objectively good game design. It forces the player to think, to adapt, and to truly learn the ins and outs of every environment in order to use it to their advantage. The world itself becomes the main character. And it's immersive as hell, especially in Hollow Knight, I won't lie. But in my estimation, from some random guy who codes and plays video games, it doesn't matter. Because it also goes against everything, at least for me, that makes games so special in the first place. I know I've been talking mostly about Hollow Knight, but the first Metroidvania I really fell in love with was Ori and the Will of the Wisps. But just like Hollow Knight, I didn't like it for how it was structured. Rather, I loved it for everything else. The whimsical soundtrack, the bright and vibrant colors, the engrossing combat, and the world and set pieces that lit a fire in my soul. And yet, at its very core once again, was a game that frustrated me so much. In standard Metroidvania fashion, Ori 2 is also built behind the idea of gating progression for the player. Every moment of intrigue is met by a brick wall, one that requires the player go back through previously tread grounds to solve. Every door or obstacle has a specific key, one that you need to find. It makes for an engaging game, but a horribly unengaging experience. What I mean by that is when I play games like this, I can feel myself starting to shut my brain off. They don't respect my intelligence. Instead of letting me solve these puzzles on my own on the fly, I'm forced to play by the game's rules and backtrack sometimes across an entire map just to endlessly search for the solution to a problem I already knew the answer to. Here's an example. When you come across an area in a Metroidvania where you need to double jump in order to reach it, it completely destroys the game for me. Because I know what I need to do. I know there must be a double jump, or monarch wings, or a spring, or some sort of gadget or add-on to my character that will finally let me push forward. But it's that cognitive dissonance of knowing exactly where to go and what I need to do without actually being able to do it that makes these games so hard to recommend in my book. The power fantasy intrinsic in all games is gated behind pre-planned set pieces, hidden rooms, and power-ups instead of the player actually growing in their own understanding of the mastery of the game itself. Bosses get harder and the platforming becomes more challenging, but this all stems from the fact that the game hides the challenge from you in the first place. Harder bosses and more challenging set pieces only can appear later in game because you quite literally don't have the necessary upgrades in order to tackle them early on, and each gated area in each level serves as a way to block the player from moving on too quickly. The much better and more interesting way to do this is to instead throw as much challenge at the player as quickly as possible, giving them everything they need to win, but providing key upgrades and powers that simply make the experience easier or more fun as you go. Because in an environment like that, the gameplay revolves around the player and their own ability to understand how to play the game, rather than the new skills they've acquired. Skills in video games should be an optional augmentation for your character, not a requirement to move the story forward. The way Metroidvanias do this is fine in their own right, and I get why people love them. But I truly believe that the power-ups we are getting in Metroidvanias should just allow us to experience new playstyles, and never be a requirement. Because as it stands, it takes away from the core of what makes games great, the ability to give the player agency over their own world and story. And it gets worse too. Because games like Ori and Hollow Knight also encourage a lot of backtracking. You have to go back through areas that you've already cleared and fight the same enemies over and over, but this time with better skills and more abilities, which yes, makes you feel good about how much better you're at the game now and how much better you understand the levels, but I don't think that sense of satisfaction overrides the pure boredom of looking at my map and knowing I need to go explore the same areas again for the 5th time just to get into some weird underground tunnel I didn't have access to before. Is that really better than having a brand new zone and area with new art design? Well, the answer is it can be, but the way it's implemented in Metroidvanias is so problematic because those areas that we get to go explore later are places we already knew about and simply kept a mental check for later. When you stumble upon a new area, the absolute worst feeling you can get is realizing that yes, you discovered something cool, but no, you can't go there yet. Come back when you have double jump. It's such an insulting way to design games that once again forces players to shut off their brains and simply buckle up their seatbelts and enjoy the ride. Backtracking through an area can be amazing, but only when those discoveries that you make are ones that are not gated by some abstract piece of game design that stops all the fun. If you find a new area, you should almost always have a way to access it. If you have a hard boss, it should almost always be at least possible early on. Don't gatekeep the fun and intrigue from everyone just because you have a specific vision for your game. That's what movies are for. Games though, games can be so much more impactful than that, putting the power in the player's hands. A game where your vision is the player's vision. The real question then becomes though, have any of these games actually done it right? Well, yes, one specifically has. A game that is one of the greatest ever made that is criminally underrated nowadays and seldom talked about. Prey and Prey Mooncrash.